Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running for president in 2024, and so far he has been one of the most interesting candidates in the race. He is running as a Democrat, but probably has more in common with the MAGA movement than many mainstream Republicans. Regardless, he is definitely a dissident within his own party. Today, let's break down the Kennedy 2024 presidential campaign, the good, the bad, and the possibilities. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the fourth in his family to seek the presidency. His uncle John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960 and won. He was president for 3 years before ultimately being assassinated. His father, Robert F. Kennedy, ran in 1968 and was assassinated after winning the California primary. His other uncle, Ted Kennedy, ran in 1980 unsuccessfully, but remained a senator until his death in 2009. JFK won and was assassinated. Both RFK and Ted lost, but they brought down incumbent Democrat establishment presidents in the elections following their primary challenges. To put it bluntly, the Kennedy name is powerful. Powerful enough to torpedo a sitting president without even winning the primary. RFK and JFK were anti-establishment, and they were killed for it. RFK Jr. is running his campaign in their image, in their memory. So what makes Kennedy different from the Democratic Party at large? First and foremost is his war stance. He is against the American funding of the war in Ukraine. He's against basically all the foreign wars we've been engaged in during my lifetime. He believes we should be negotiating a peace, not funding a greater war. He understands, unlike most politicians in both parties, that Ukraine is currently losing this war, and to negotiate a peace will require Ukraine to make some concessions. Listen to this clip from his recent town hall with Sean Hannity.
Putin sends 40,000 troops in. That's not enough to conquer the country. Clearly, he wanted us to come to the negotiation. He wanted somebody to come to the negotiating table. Zelensky came to the negotiating table, signed a new agreement that was the Minsk Accords 2 in 2022, and that would have allowed Donbass to stay, and Lugansk to remain as part of Ukraine. We said Putin signed it, Zelensky initialed it, and Putin, in good faith, began withdrawing troops from the Ukraine. What happened? We sent Boris Johnson over there to torpedo it, because we don't want peace we want the war with Russia.
Why are you blaming America's role in this? And look, Putin to me is an evil, murdering dictator thug, and when he leaves this earth, nobody's going to miss him. Let's be honest. Joe Biden has committed all these billions of dollars that we can't afford, and he's not fighting the war to win the war. I don't believe in fighting wars half-assed. If you're going to fight a war, you go in, overwhelming force, you beat them, you get the hell out. That's it, and only if it's provoked. Putin did not need to invade a sovereign country.
I don't think most of the European countries wanted the war either. It's clear what happened, which is that, from the beginning, we promised in 1992, the Russian leadership said, we will move, this was Gorbachev, said when the Soviet Union, he was getting ready to dismantle the Soviet Union, and he said, we're going to withdraw 400,000 troops from East Germany. And we're going to allow you to reunite Germany under NATO, which is a hostile army. That's a huge concession for them. The one commitment that we want, is what the Russians said, is that you will not move NATO to the east. James Baker, who was then Secretary of State under Bush, famously promised, we will not move NATO 1 inch to the east. Well, since then, we've moved it 1,000 miles in 14 countries. Now, when we started that plan in 1997, Bill Perry, who was the Secretary of Defense under Clinton, said to the Clinton administration, if you move NATO to the east, I'm resigning because you are forcing the Russians to come to war with us. You do not need to make an enemy out of Russia.
Now, Hannity represents the neocon Republican position. That is, oversimplifying a very complex geopolitical situation, labeling one side the devil, in this case Russia, and arguing that we should use the full force of the United States military to go and win the war. That policy is one which would lead to the deaths of thousands of Americans and possibly a nuclear war. It is total insanity. RFK is basically one of maybe 3 presidential candidates I would trust to go and negotiate peace in the European East, and his answers in this town hall just reinforced that conviction. Kennedy would help us get out of the role of being the world's police force, and would seek to return the focus of American policy to domestic policy, leaving our foreign policy in a state similar to the Monroe Doctrine, and bringing our focus and our energy back to fixing our problems here at home. Ultimately, he would be a major thorn in the side to the military-industrial complex, an entity we were warned about right before his uncle's presidency in Eisenhower's farewell address.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Kennedy is a free speech absolutist. He believes in the First Amendment, not just for speech you agree with, but especially for those you disagree with. He was a target of censorship by the Biden administration in the very first days of their administration, and he would do great things to rein in big tech when they censor the American people. Just as with freedom of speech, he also believes in medical freedom. Kennedy has taken a stance on the jab that is much better than both Trump and DeSantis. While this hopefully is becoming less relevant as COVID becomes a distant memory, RFK has taken a strong stance against all forced jabs, but especially mRNA treatments. He believes in absolute bodily autonomy and believes all medical treatments should be required to undergo double-blind placebo testing before they are approved for mass use by the public, regardless of if there's a pandemic or an emergency. We should not be taking experimental drugs, and we should definitely not be forcing them on the American people. Democrats hate this because it goes against their ability to have control over the lives of private American citizens. Kennedy also sets himself apart from mainstream Democrats when it comes to the environment. Kennedy cares about the planet, but he's not a Green New Deal nutjob. If anything, what Kennedy believes in is environmental conservation. He is much more in line with Teddy Roosevelt than with AOC. He wants to protect our forests, clean our rivers, ensure that drinking water is clean, and stop bad pollution. He's not talking about environmental socialism. He's not talking about banning gas cars and stoves. He's not talking about killing off our cows. Kennedy's environmental approach is reasonable. It's actually somewhat conservative. We should want to conserve the natural beauty of God's creation. Should we not? Kennedy's environmentalism is in line with statements made by Tucker Carlson, and I tend to agree with them. Nature should not be destroyed in the name of corporate progress. Lastly, Kennedy has made it a big focus of his campaign that he will actually drain the swamp. Or as he puts it, he will end the corporate capture of government agencies and close the revolving door that allows government officials to be bribed in exchange for cushy corporate jobs at the corporations they are supposed to be regulating, and vice versa. He has criticized the Trump administration for not doing enough to drain the swamp, and that is a fair criticism. Trump did not deliver on this as much as he promised. But to be fair, Trump didn't know just how deep the swamp was until he actually became president. A second term would be different. As Kennedy puts it on his issues page, Wall Street controls the SEC. Polluters and extractive industries dominate the EPA. Pharma controls the CDC, NIH, and the FDA. Big agriculture controls the USDA. Big tech has captured the FTC. Kennedy says that he knows better than anyone how to end this corporate capture because he has been litigating against these people his entire career. He knows who the troublemakers are, and he's going to remove them from power when he's president. Kennedy would not just go after the regulatory agencies, but also the law enforcement agencies. His uncle and father never trusted the CIA and FBI, and RFK watched as both of them were assassinated. He promises to protect whistleblowers and prosecute officials who abuse the public trust. And I think if anyone can reform our Justice Department, it's him. So that's a lot of upside to Kennedy, but let's quickly cover what's bad. Kennedy is still a liberal, albeit a classical liberal instead of a far-left progressive, as we've become accustomed to in the Democratic Party today. That being said, he still holds liberal positions. Kennedy is pro-choice. He believes in bodily autonomy, but not when it comes to the baby in the womb. He is trying to win a Democratic primary after all, and obviously he would be dead on arrival if he took a pro-life stance. But it is his most damning stance, nonetheless.
I believe that a decision to abort a child should be up to the women during the first 3 months of life.
So you would cap it at 15 weeks?
Yes.
Or 21
Yes.
weeks?
Yeah, for 3 months.
So 3 months. You would sign a federal cap on that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So not unlimited access to abortion, as many in the Democratic Party.
I think the state...
Kennedy has also come out in favor of affirmative action. Again, not a conservative position because he is a Democrat. Kennedy refrains from attacking fellow Democrats in many cases where it seems warranted. He will not comment on Biden's obviously senile state. He would likely protect the Biden, Clinton, and Obama families from further investigations. But this is just the minimum of what is expected from a Democratic candidate for president. Will he govern differently than he is campaigning? I can't tell you right now, and I don't think he will govern. But it is his current stance as a candidate. So what should we think? I, for one, support RFK in his bid for the Democratic nomination. I do not support him for president. I want him to get upward of 30 or 40% in the primary. I would love it if he took away a few early primary states from Joe Biden. This could serve to weaken the incumbent president in the general, just as his father did to LBJ in 1968 before Johnson withdrew from the presidential primary race, and just as his uncle did to Carter before Reagan beat him in an electoral landslide in 1980. I may want Kennedy to do well in the primary, but I do not want him to be the Democratic nominee, because I actually believe he could defeat Trump in a general election. He would hold on to the Rust Belt and most likely lock any Republican out of the White House. I also don't want him to run third party because he would likely win over the voters who voted for Trump in 2016 and Biden in 2020. We need those people to vote for Trump in 2024 and not give them an appealing third party option. I would like to see RFK join in a formal political alliance with President Trump. I would like to see him refuse to endorse Joe Biden for the general election. It's almost impossible that Trump would pick him for VP, though that would make for the strongest electoral ticket possible. But there are many other things Trump could offer RFK. The best possibility, in my opinion, would be for Trump to announce RFK as his Secretary of State, and that he would become a core advisor when it comes to draining the swamp in his second term. This move would maximize the RFK primary voters coming out to support Trump in the general, and it is something the RNC would not be able to stop. I think there would be a war at the convention if Trump tried to pick RFK for vice president, but as Secretary of State or Attorney General even, all Kennedy needs to do is pass a Senate confirmation process, which wouldn't be impossible even if it wouldn't be easy. If Kennedy wants to live up to his campaign slogan and actually help heal the divide, the best thing he could do after losing a primary is to help Trump defeat the warmongering uniparty that has disenfranchised the people. He can bring together the remaining Kennedy Democrats and the MAGA Republicans into a coalition that will lead America back out of the neoliberal darkness. This would be a great legacy for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to leave for the good of our nation. I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and share the video with a friend. A little announcement at the end of this video. This is the last video in this studio. I am moving, and this background will not be what we have anymore. I thank you guys for coming along on this journey, and I look forward to what our next studio will look like and the journey going forward. We will be back very soon. Take care, and God bless.
Do you want a man with spirit who is not afraid to fight?
A man whose record shows that he will fight for what is right.
A loyal man who'll bring the job a fresh new point of view.
Well, it's up to you, it's up to you.
It's strictly up to you.
'Cause it's Kennedy, 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 Kennedy for me.
Kennedy, 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 Kennedy.